Have you ever noticed how the loudest person in the room rarely holds the most power? Think about it. When someone walks in and says nothing, yet you feel their presence shift the entire atmosphere, what is that? That's not luck. That's not accident. That's the unspoken force of silence, and it is stronger than any words you could ever throw into the air. We live in a world obsessed with noise. Everyone wants to be heard, to prove, to argue, to convince. But when you step back and choose silence, you separate yourself from the crowd. You don't need to explain who you are. You don't need to justify your value. Your energy does the speaking, and people feel it before you ever open your mouth. Silence, when owned with confidence, is not emptiness. It is presence. It is gravity. The human brain is wired to respond to non-verbal signals faster than to words. Long before you speak, people have already judged your energy, your confidence, your stability. They notice how you carry yourself, how steady your eyes are, how calm your breathing is. Silence is not a void. It's a stage where your true strength performs. The person who doesn't need to speak to be felt is the one others cannot ignore. When you embrace silence, you no longer chase attention, you command it. You no longer beg to be heard. You create a space where people lean in, waiting for what you might say, even if you never do. That's power. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that radiates. And in a world of endless noise, that power is magnetic. Think of the last time you stayed silent instead of defending yourself. Remember how the air shifted? Your silence wasn't weakness, it was a mirror. And in that mirror they saw themselves clearly, sometimes for the first time. That's the force you hold when you stop rushing to speak. People reveal themselves when you say nothing. They expose their truth without you lifting a finger. Silence also frees you. It gives you space to breathe, to think, to listen. It removes the pressure to constantly react. And in that calm you find control. You are no longer ruled by emotion. You are no longer dragged into chaos. Instead, you stand firm, untouchable. This is how respect is earned, not by shouting louder, but by showing you don't need to shout at all. Imagine what your life would feel like if you stopped wasting energy explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Imagine if you no longer needed to argue, to prove, to fight for space. What if your silence was enough? It already is, because when your presence is rooted in strength, they feel it. They can't ignore it. They may not admit it, but they will never forget it. Stay with this truth. Let it sink deep. You don't need to rush. You don't need to chase. And you don't need to prove. The world already feels you. Your silence is your message. Your silence is your power. And the moment you embrace it fully, you'll understand that you said nothing, but they felt everything. When you choose silence, something powerful happens. You strip away their excuses. Words can be argued with, twisted, dismissed, but silence leaves no shield, no defense, no distraction. It forces people to sit with themselves. And in that stillness, their own behavior becomes louder than anything you could ever say. They replay the moment in their minds, questioning what they did, why you didn't respond, and what your silence really meant. That is the weight of truth, and it is unavoidable. People are uncomfortable with silence because it reveals, it uncovers insecurity, it magnifies guilt, it brings hidden intentions into the light. And when you refuse to argue or explain, you hand them the mirror they've been avoiding. Suddenly, their actions echo louder than your words ever could. They feel the sting of their own choices, because you didn't give them a fight to hide behind. That's the quiet strength of silence. It doesn't protect their ego, it exposes it. This is where your real power lies. Anyone can shout back. Anyone can defend themselves with endless explanations. But not everyone can remain calm while others lose control. That calm shakes people. It unsettles them because it cannot be manipulated. They can't twist your words if you never gave them any. They can't control your reaction if you chose not to give one. Instead, they are left to wrestle with their own reflection, and that battle is far more powerful than any argument you could win. Psychology calls it cognitive dissonance, the discomfort people feel when their actions don't align with their self-image. Your silence amplifies that discomfort. They want you to react, to argue, to give them a reason to feel justified. But when you don't, they are forced to face the dissonance head-on. It lingers, it burns, it forces growth. That's why silence is not passive, it's active transformation, not for you, but for them. And here's the deeper truth. When you stop defending yourself, you stop giving away your energy. You are no longer trapped in endless cycles of trying to prove your worth. Instead, you keep your dignity, your clarity, your peace. The people who need to see the truth will feel it, even if they never admit it to you. And those who refuse will only expose themselves further, without you lifting a single finger. That is freedom. That is control. Ask yourself, how many times have you drained yourself in battles that solve nothing? How often have you walked away from arguments feeling empty even when you won? Winning with words doesn't change hearts. But silence, true, grounded silence, forces people to face what words never could. It plants seeds that grow long after the moment is over. They may forget what you said, but they will never forget how your silence made them feel. This is why silence is truth in its purest form. It doesn't need defense. It doesn't need decoration. It simply exists, undeniable, unshakable, undeniable. And when you learn to trust it, you no longer live in reaction. You live in mastery. Let them speak, let them argue, let them try to convince. You don't need to fight. You don't need to prove. You are the truth they cannot escape, and your silence will make sure they feel it. Respect is not claimed by demanding it. It is earned by embodying it. And nothing commands respect more than the quiet certainty of someone who does not need to speak to prove who they are. When you remain silent in a world addicted to constant talking, you create contrast. That contrast is what makes people stop and notice. The mind is wired to pay attention to what breaks patterns. And when every voice is trying to be louder, the one who chooses stillness becomes unforgettable. Think about how rare it is today to meet someone who doesn't overshare, who doesn't rush to explain, who doesn't need to fill every empty space with words. That rarity alone creates value. Silence suggests depth. It suggests discipline. It suggests that you are not controlled by the need for approval. When you are silent, you are no longer chasing. You are no longer proving. You are allowing your presence to speak for itself, and that alone demands recognition. People respect restraint because it shows strength. Anyone can speak endlessly, but not everyone has the power to hold back. Silence says, I am in control of myself. It says, I am not ruled by impulse. That kind of control is rare, and rare things are always respected. In silence, you carry yourself as someone who doesn't beg for space. You already own it. This doesn't mean silence is about arrogance. It's not about being cold. It's about standing so firmly in who you are that you no longer need external validation to feel whole. That confidence radiates. Others feel it even if they can't put it into words. They sense stability. They sense strength. And whether they admit it or not, they respect it. The respect you earn in silence is deeper than the kind gained through loudness. Words can impress in the moment, but their effect fades. Silence, however, lingers. It makes people wonder about you. It creates mystery, and mystery always increases value. When people cannot fully read you, they cannot dismiss you. They keep thinking about you long after the moment has passed. That is the quiet respect of silence. It doesn't shout. It stays with them. Neuroscience shows that humans are drawn to what they cannot predict. Your silence is unpredictable in a noisy world. It forces others to adjust, to question, to focus on you. And in that focus, they give you their attention without you asking for it. That attention is the root of respect. It is the recognition that your presence matters. When you no longer seek respect through words, you become magnetic. You stop trying to convince and you start embodying. You stop chasing recognition, and you start commanding it without effort. And the more you embrace silence, the more you rise above the noise that consumes everyone else. Respect comes when you prove you don't need to fight for it. Respect comes when you can walk into any space and let your presence do the work. Respect comes when you are no longer desperate to explain, because the truth of who you are is already undeniable. That is the kind of respect that lasts. That is the kind of respect no one can take away. And it is earned not by speaking but by the strength of your silence. What people feel from you goes far beyond what you say. Long before your words register in their mind, your energy has already spoken to their heart. Human beings are wired with mirror neurons, designed to pick up on the emotions and states of others. That means every thought you hold, every feeling you carry, radiates outward like a signal. You cannot hide the truth of your inner world, because even in silence, others sense it. Your presence tells the story before your lips ever move. This is why silence is never truly silent. When you stand in front of someone with calm confidence, they feel it. When you carry unresolved chaos within, they feel that too. Energy cannot be disguised. It cannot be masked by clever words. People may not always know why they feel a certain way around you, but they will always feel it. And what they feel will matter more than what you say. The energy you bring into any space is your loudest language. It communicates strength, peace, and clarity, or fear, desperation, and uncertainty. That choice is always yours. When your silence is rooted in self-assurance, it becomes magnetic. People feel safe in your presence. They feel drawn to you. They feel the gravity of your spirit. That's influence at its purest level, not through persuasion, not through argument, but through alignment. This is why mastering your inner energy matters more than perfecting your words. Words can be rehearsed, words can be faked. But energy never lies. It betrays what you truly believe about yourself. If you see yourself as unworthy, people will feel that. If you know your value deeply without needing to declare it, people will feel that too. Silence transmits the frequency of your belief, and the world responds to it. Your energy is always teaching others how to treat you. If you radiate desperation, they will sense they can take advantage. If you radiate insecurity, they will sense they can dismiss you. But if you radiate self-respect, calm strength, and grounded presence, they will have no choice but to meet you at that level. That is why silence is such a powerful teacher. It holds up your energy like a beacon, and people cannot help but react to it. So refine your inner state. Guard your energy with intention. Carry peace where chaos is expected. Carry confidence where doubt surrounds you. Carry restraint where provocation is thrown your way. When your energy is steady, your silence becomes impossible to ignore. You don't need to convince anyone of who you are. They will feel it in the way the atmosphere shifts when you walk in. This is the essence of unshakable presence. You don't need to be the loudest. You don't need to be the one constantly explaining. You don't even need to be the one speaking at all. When your energy is aligned with truth, people listen to you without words. They notice you without effort. They respect you without demand. Silence reveals what words often try to hide. It projects the unfiltered truth of your inner state. And when you cultivate that truth to be one of strength, calmness, and certainty, the message you send in your silence is undeniable. They may never be able to describe it, but they will feel it deeply. And in that feeling, your silence speaks louder than any voice ever could. The greatest strength you will ever show is the ability to stay silent when every part of you is tempted to react. Anyone can lash out. Anyone can defend themselves with anger, but very few can hold their composure when provoked. That restraint is not weakness. It is mastery. It proves that you are not controlled by impulses, emotions, or the behavior of others. It proves that your power comes from within, not from their ability to pull you into chaos. When you refuse to react, you keep control of the moment. The one who reacts is the one who loses. The one who remains steady is the one who leads. People expect explosions, they expect outbursts, they expect you to give them the satisfaction of seeing you lose control. When you don't, when you stand in silence with composure, you create a kind of strength that cannot be ignored. It unsettles them. It makes them realize they cannot reach you, they cannot manipulate you, they cannot drag you down to their level. Restraint builds respect because it is so rare. Most people are slaves to their triggers. They fire back instantly, without thought, without reflection, without wisdom. But when you choose silence, you prove that you are different. You are disciplined. You are in command of yourself. That alone elevates you above the noise, because true power is never frantic, never desperate, never out of control. Power is calm. It is deliberate. It is silent when silence is stronger than words. Silence also creates mystery. When you don't reveal everything, when you don't explain your every thought, people are left wondering. And the human mind cannot resist wondering. They try to guess what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you might do next. That uncertainty gives you an advantage because it keeps you unpredictable. And unpredictability is power. The less they can read you, the more they respect you. The less they can anticipate you, the more careful they become around you. By restraining yourself, you are not holding back weakness. You are displaying control. Control over your emotions, control over your energy, control over your life. And in that control lies freedom. No one owns your reactions. No one has access to your peace. No one can drag you into battles you did not choose. You walk away untouched because you decided your silence was worth more than their chaos. Ask yourself, why waste your strength trying to prove what you already know? Why waste your voice defending yourself against people who have already decided what they want to believe? Why hand over your power by reacting to every provocation? The truth is, you don't need to. Your silence speaks louder. Your restraint is the proof. Your control is the message. There is a quiet authority in someone who does not need to show off their power, yet everyone feels it. That authority is built in silence. That authority is sustained by restraint. And when you choose it consistently, you will notice something profound. You stop being controlled by the world, and the world begins to adjust to you. They listen closer. They tread carefully. They feel your strength, even though you said nothing. There are moments when silence is heavier than any speech. Words can soften a truth, they can bend it, they can cover it. But silence leaves nothing to hide behind. It carries everything unsaid, everything felt, everything unspoken but undeniable. People may forget what you say, but they will never forget how your silence made them feel. It lingers, it echoes, it creates weight that words often cannot hold. When you choose not to speak, you allow others to sit with the reality of what remains unspoken. They project their own fears, doubts, and insecurities into that silence. They replay conversations in their minds, searching for meaning, wondering what you are thinking, what you are holding back. That wondering is more powerful than explanation. It is more powerful than argument. It makes your silence unforgettable. The human mind cannot stand unfinished patterns. When something is left unsaid, the mind seeks to complete it. This is why silence feels so powerful. It forces others to finish the sentence with their own imagination. And what they imagine is often far greater, far heavier, far deeper than what you could have said. Silence allows their own conscience to speak louder than your voice ever could. Unspoken words carry a special intensity because they create space. Space for reflection. Space for realization. Space for truth to emerge without being pushed. Sometimes the most impactful statement is the one you never make, because it gives the other person no distraction, no defense, no argument to lean on. It leaves them alone with what they already know but tried to avoid. That is why silence is a weight many cannot carry. You don't always need to confront. You don't always need to explain. You don't always need to prove your side of the story. Silence does it for you. It does it with more force, more clarity, more depth than words ever could. The quiet of unspoken words is louder than shouting, because it allows the truth to pierce through without resistance. Even in moments of love, pain, or loss, silence holds everything that words cannot capture. The heaviness in your chest, the depth of your feelings, the intensity of your experience, all of it radiates through silence in ways language cannot replicate. That is why silence feels so alive. It is not absence. It is fullness. It is the container of everything you feel but cannot explain. When you learn to embrace the weight of silence, you stop fearing it. You begin to understand that it is not emptiness. It is presence at its most powerful. You understand that sometimes your greatest strength is not in speaking, but in allowing silence to carry the truth for you. And in that silence you are remembered. You are felt. You are impossible to ignore. This is the paradox of silence. It looks like nothing, but it holds everything. It is invisible, but it is unforgettable. And when you stand in it with confidence, when you allow your unspoken words to hang in the air, you no longer need to fight for impact. The impact is already there. The silence has spoken, and it has said more than words ever could. Silence is not only a message to others, it is a mirror held up to yourself. In stillness, the noise of the world falls away, and what remains is the truth of who you are. Most people run from silence because it forces them to face themselves. It strips away distraction. It strips away excuses. It leaves you alone with your thoughts, your fears, your dreams, and your hidden strength. That is where transformation begins. Not in the chaos of noise, but in the clarity of silence. When you allow yourself to sit in silence, you begin to notice how much you've been carrying that does not belong to you. The opinions, the judgments, the endless noise of others. It all starts to fade. What emerges is your own voice, quiet but powerful, waiting beneath the surface. And the more you listen to it, the more you realize that you don't need the world to validate you. You don't need to chase approval. You already hold everything you've been seeking inside yourself. Psychology proves that stillness rewires the mind. Silence reduces anxiety. It strengthens clarity. It improves decision-making. It brings your nervous system back into balance, allowing you to step out of survival mode and into mastery. The more you embrace it, the stronger you become, because silence teaches you to respond with intention instead of reacting with impulse. It sharpens your awareness and connects you to the kind of power that cannot be shaken by outside forces. Silence also builds self-respect. When you no longer feel the need to explain yourself, you affirm your own worth. You show yourself that your value doesn't depend on being understood. It depends on being true to yourself. Every time you choose stillness over argument, every time you choose peace over proving, you reinforce the truth that your power comes from within. That is how transformation takes root. Not in convincing others, but in aligning with your own strength. In silence, you also connect with something larger than yourself. The noise of the world keeps you focused outward, constantly pulled by distractions. But silence turns you inward, where wisdom lives. It is in silence that intuition speaks. It is in silence that you feel guided, centered, grounded. And once you learn to trust that voice, you stop being swayed by every opinion, every criticism, every passing judgment. You rise above it, unshaken. This inner transformation radiates outward. The more peace you cultivate within, the more peace you bring into every interaction. The more clarity you hold, the more others sense it in your presence. Transformation is not something you need to announce. It shows. It's felt. People may not be able to describe it, but they will notice something different in you. They will notice your silence, your calm, your steady strength, and that will inspire them far more than any speech ever could. Your silence is not emptiness. It is alignment. It is the refining fire that burns away all that is false, leaving only what is true. And when you embrace that, you no longer fear the quiet. You welcome it. You live in it. And through it, you become someone who is no longer controlled by noise, but guided by strength. Transformation is born there, in the stillness, in the silence, in the space where everything falls away, and you finally see yourself clearly. Silence becomes unstoppable when you no longer see it as emptiness, but as evidence of who you are. Every time you refuse to defend yourself, you declare your worth without a single word. Every time you choose to remain calm when others expect chaos, you prove your strength without needing to prove anything. This is not weakness. This is authority. It is the quiet, unshakable kind of authority that cannot be challenged, because it does not come from others. It comes from you. You don't need to argue for your place in this world. You don't need to fight to be seen. When you believe in yourself deeply enough, others feel it. They feel it in the way you stand, in the way you move, in the way you don't flinch when they push. Your silence communicates a truth words could never carry. You are unbothered. You are unshaken. You are complete. That truth is more powerful than any defense you could ever offer. People may misunderstand you. They may misjudge you. They may try to twist your actions to fit their own narrative. Let them. Their words do not change who you are. Their opinions do not strip your value. Silence is the answer that proves you are bigger than their judgment. Silence is the boundary that tells the world you do not exist to be explained. You exist to be felt. And the more you lean into that truth, the more you realize that those who matter will feel everything, even if you said nothing. This is the final level of strength, to no longer seek understanding but to radiate it from within, to stop begging the world to see your worth because you already know it, to stop giving energy to those who will never understand because their validation was never the prize. The real prize is your peace. The real prize is your freedom. And silence protects both. Think about the way silence lingers after you walk away. Think about how it makes people question themselves, how it makes them reflect, how it makes them remember you long after the moment is gone. That is why silence is so powerful. It does not end when the words stop. It keeps speaking in their mind, in their heart, in their memory. And long after they forget conversations with others, they will remember the weight of what they felt from you. You do not need to force people to listen. You do not need to compete with noise. When you live in silence with confidence, they cannot escape you. They may ignore your words, but they cannot ignore your presence. They may dismiss your actions, but they cannot dismiss what they feel when you stand strong without saying a thing. That is the kind of influence that leaves a mark. That is the kind of strength that changes the room. You said nothing, yet they felt the truth. You said nothing, yet they felt your strength. You said nothing, yet they felt your presence in a way words could never capture. That is the power you hold. That is the weapon, the shield, the proof of who you are. And when you finally embrace it fully, you no longer need to be heard to be unforgettable. They will feel everything, even when you choose to say nothing at all. There is a unique strength in choosing stillness when everything around you demands reaction. The world conditions you to explain yourself, to prove yourself, to rush into defense at the slightest hint of misunderstanding. But the moment you stop playing that game, you take back control. You no longer live at the mercy of others' interpretations. You no longer bend yourself into the fragile shape of their expectations. You stand tall in the fullness of who you are, and in that choice, you become untouchable. Every second you resist the urge to defend yourself, you build a deeper fortress within. Every moment you remain silent, instead of scrambling for approval, you train your spirit to recognize its own authority. You realize that your power was never in convincing them, it was in commanding yourself. And once you master that, no opinion, no insult, no judgment can move you. You become the mountain in the storm, unmoved, unbroken, unyielding. The truth is, most people speak from projection, not perception. They do not see you as you are. They see you as a reflection of their own fears, insecurities, and limitations. Why waste your breath defending yourself against shadows? Why surrender your peace to people who cannot even see clearly? Silence is not a lack of response. It is the refusal to validate illusions. It is the conscious decision to rise above battles that were never worthy of your energy. And when you no longer rush to correct the false versions of you in their minds, something remarkable happens. They begin to feel the weight of their own words. They begin to sit in the discomfort of their own judgments. They begin to realize that your silence is not weakness but a mirror. It reflects their intentions back to them with a sharpness that words could never achieve. They thought they could define you, but instead, they end up confronting themselves. This is how silence transforms you. It stops being the absence of speech and becomes the presence of power. It becomes a living statement that declares, I do not owe anyone my energy. I do not owe anyone my explanation. I am whole as I am. That kind of energy cannot be ignored. It cannot be dismissed. It lingers in the air. It shifts dynamics. It commands respect even from those who would never admit it. Every time you choose silence, you reclaim time, energy, and focus. You stop scattering your power in 1,000 directions and begin channeling it inward, where it belongs. That is why silence strengthens you. It keeps your energy concentrated, building intensity, building depth, building presence. And the deeper your presence grows, the more undeniable you become. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to demand to be seen. Your existence itself becomes enough. When you live in this state, peace is no longer fragile. Confidence is no longer conditional. Respect is no longer something you chase. It is something you radiate. And the world, whether it wants to or not, feels it. They may not always acknowledge it, but they will always sense it. Because silence, when chosen with strength, is unforgettable. It is the language of those who no longer need to be understood to know their worth. It is the mark of those who have stepped fully into their power. And when you embrace it, you stop being someone who fights to prove themselves. You become someone whose very presence proves everything.